the sheet that says Lesson 9. That's where we're at. The devil, sin, and hell is what we've been studying. Last few weeks primarily focused in on sin, part of this series. We talked about what the Bible says about sin, and we listed those things, maybe some others. If you'll think back on our notes, on your notes, you'll see that sin's missing the mark. Wages of sin is death. Causes a seared conscience, and all those things that are mentioned there. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about these lists. If you look at that list of the lists, primarily Paul, every time he would write a letter, he would include a list of ways that people sin, activities that people would be involved in that would be sinful. We've primarily focused in the last couple weeks, 3 weeks or so, on Romans, the end of chapter 1. And that list there that I describe or I have noted there would be what Paul said was part of a reprobate mind. And the last one we talked about was malignity. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on that, so I wanted to make sure that we had good notes on that from lesson number 8. Malignity is to think the worst of others. Had this page up there as well. Deep-rooted in spite, the English Standard Version, maybe even the New King James, calls it evil-mindedness. An evil disposition. And I think of it this way. Someone that sees somebody doing something and they think the worst of it, of that situation or whatever's going on. Why do they do that? Why do they automatically go to the worst, thinking the worst of others? And I think it has rooted to do in the fact of they're thinking, well, if I was in that situation, that's what I would do too. So they have this, as it says there, this disposition to cheat people, to lie to people, to mistreat people. And so they automatically think that that's what everybody else is doing too. Does that make sense? Now that may not always be the case. Maybe there's just some people out there that are just bad, evil. But I think it has to do a lot with that's the way they treat people, so they think that that's how people are treating them. They think the worst of the situation. They don't cut anybody a break. They automatically jump to a bad or the wrong conclusion maybe at sometimes. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, the chapter on love. Love thinks no evil. That's directly opposed to this thought of malignity. And then I put on here malignity. That makes us think of malignant, doesn't it? And if something's malignant, what I've written up here is, if it's not taken care of, it tends to produce death. So a malignant attitude or malignity, it's going to lead to death of what? Relationships, friendships. And it's a sin, so it's going to lead to being separated from God, which is spiritual death. And I noted down there at the bottom a word that we've had before, maliciousness. It is strongly related to maliciousness. All right, so let's go on to chapter 9, or lesson 9. Whispers. Define the sin of whispers. Any ideas? Okay. Gossiping. Secret slander is the way that it was defined in the book that I'm using. Gossiping, Be a very good definition for it. Look at that word. I'm going to say that P and S together is like we say Psalms. We don't say psalms. So I'm going to say that's sithurismos. Sithurismos. Secret slander. Look at these words that define it. A tattler, a conveyor of secrets, a talebearer. The English Standard Version uses that word we've already said, gossip. Some people say it's not gossip. Oh, it was true, so it's not gossip. No, that's not right, is it? Whether it's true or not, secret slander. Proverbs 16:28. Proverbs 16:28. Thought I had it pulled up. I went somewhere else. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separated chief's friends. Close friends, best friends. Whispers separate them. It ruins friendships, Proverbs 16:28. Ruins associations. I found another one, Proverbs 26. Where no wood is, the fire goeth out. We know that, don't we? We don't keep the wood in the fire. Eventually it goes out. There's no fuel for it. Well, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Listen to this. Where no wood is, the fire goeth out. Where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. So what does that mean? Without somebody, we call it poking the fire or pouring fuel on the fire. If somebody doesn't keep pouring fuel on it, the strife's going to cease. Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. That's the list of the 10 Commandments. It says, do not bear false witness. That's in the same neighborhood, isn't it? If you're having secret slander, you're talking bad about somebody, telling tales, gossiping. You may be telling something that's not true. Whether it's true or not, you shouldn't be doing it. Look at that last statement up there. Character assassination. We know what that means. Somebody's reputation, somebody's the way people think about them or view them. If we're going around saying slanderous things in secret about them, what are we doing to their reputation? We're harming it. We're killing it, aren't we? Character assassination for the purpose of damaging their reputation. That's whispers. There's an organization that meets here in town. Some of you maybe in the past have been a member of that organization. I have been. The Rotary Club. The Rotary Club has a 4-part test for saying things or for telling things. And it's very much based on what we would find in the New Testament. That's an organization that for community service, but they do things that are based in Christian values, kind of like our Constitution of the United States. You know, it's kind of based in the people that were of faith. Let me read to you what they say. The Rotary 4-part test. When saying something or telling something, is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? That's a pretty good place to start, isn't it, when we start talking about things, start telling things on people. First of all, is it true? Well, it might be true, but is it fair? Well, it might be true and fair, but is it going to build better relations? You see where I'm going with that? So it has to be all four, not just one of those. And I think that's very much based on what we read when we study the Bible, those things. Don't tell things that we shouldn't be telling. This sin of whispers. All right. Any comments or questions? I found one other thing. Let me mention this. And I don't know what scripture or where it came from. I have Proverbs 26:20, but we just read that about the fire and putting wood or fuel on it. But I found someplace, this is an enthusiastic talebearer. That changes it maybe a little bit, doesn't it? Enthusiastic. Someone that's looking for that opportunity to go out and tell something on somebody else. If I tell something on somebody else, what does that do to their reputation? Brings them down? What do I think that does to mine then, if I'm telling the tales? That's raising me up. Gets back to what we'll talk about maybe later, pride. Self-centered pride, egotistical. We're trying to always build ourselves up, and we do that by tearing other people down. Yeah, the pot stir. Yeah, exactly right. Hadn't thought about that in a while. Someone that's a pot stirrer. All right, well, let's go on to the next one. Sin of backbiting. Kind of the same thing, isn't it? A little bit. Backbiting. When you think of backbiting, what do you think about? First of all, if you're backbiting, you're doing it behind someone's back. So it's secret, or you're not wanting to be found out, just like the whispers. It's slander. If you write it, that's libel, isn't it? Isn't that the difference? Slander's verbal and libel's written. Might have an example of that around town, don't we? But this backbiting, where it's secret behind someone's, or whispers of secret slander, this backbiting may be open. They don't care. The person's not there, but they're not going to deny doing it. Speaking evil of others. Psalm chapter 15. Verse 3. Psalm 15:3. He that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor. And that's talking about someone that is a follower of God. Today we would call them a Christian. David's writing that, so it's not Christian, but it's a follower of God. Talks about he that walketh upright and worketh righteousness and speaketh the truth in his heart. He that backbiteth not with his tongue. Okay? So in order to be a follower, a true follower of God, someone that's obedient to God, should not be a backbiter. Let's look at that Greek word. Katalamos, alos. I want to put the M in there every time. Okay? Speaking evil of others, slandering openly. Okay? Whispers is secret, backbiting is more open. Talking behind someone's back. I guess that's where the backbiting comes from. Talking behind someone's back. Publicly making false statements. We get into bear false witness, the same thing that we talked about with the Ten Commandments. Whether it's printed or written, whether it's spoken, it's all the same things. Look at this. The reason I went back to malignity and mentioned it and kind of got that as our running off starting point. If malignity is thinking evil of others, whispers are secretly talking about others, defaming their character. Backbiting is more open. Do you see this progression? One kind of leads to the other. Malignity leads to whispers, leads to backbiting. A word that we used before, maliciousness or malice. That's where you hate people, isn't it? Having a hatred for people. So these are connected one to the other. Always try to give us a cultural reference if we can for what this is. And I couldn't think of anything any better than what Thumper's mom told him. And it's not about eating the greens. What did Thumper's mom tell him? If you can't say something nice, and Kevin's mom told him that, and Regina's mom, and Stan, we can all go around. Everybody was told that. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Were you told that? I was definitely told that. Publicly making false statements, being a false witness. And we're commanded in the Ten Commandments that we're not to bear false witness. All right, that was kind of quick on backbiting, but it kind of related to the ones that went before. So if there's any questions or comments about backbiting. No, that's exactly right. It said if you have to eat your words and they're not going to taste good when you take them back, you probably shouldn't put them out there to begin with. The sin of haters of God. Haters of God. Those people that detest God. Our teachers in the audience, in the gathering here, you see what I did there? You ask a question and the kid just reworks the question to give you the answer. That's kind of what I did there. Detest is another word for hate, right? Maybe not as strong as hate, but I use that. Hater of God is one who detests God. So I don't know if I get full credit or not. Would you give me full credit, Miss Allen? Maybe. Someone that detests God. Let's look at that. Theo, of course, the beginning of that word, Theo, is God. Theostogase. Theostogase. To detest God. You go to Matthew chapter 22, verse 37. Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? What does he say? Love God with all your heart, mind, soul. Second's likened to it. Love your neighbor. But if the greatest commandment is to love God, that would put, if we were ranking sin, we don't do that, do we? Sin is sin. But maybe this is the root. This is the root of sinning, right? We don't respect God. We don't love Him. We don't, as we see later on here, we don't obey Him. That causes us to commit sin, different kinds of sin, different ways to sin. But the greatest command is to love God. So when we don't love God, we hate God. I'll prove that to you in just a second. John 14:15 says, if you love me, do what? Keep my commandments. So the reverse of that. If you don't do my commandments, you hate me, right? 2 Timothy 3:2. They're lovers of their own self. They have pride. Let me scroll down there and find that. I think it's raining. For men shall be lovers of their own self. And here's the list that Paul sent to Timothy. Covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. It's the same list that we're doing, isn't it? Look at all that. Lovers, get down to verse 4. Lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Okay? So if we're not obedient to God, we're not a lover of God, we're a hater of God. People that resent authority, they're proud, they blame God. Kind of thought here, 1 Corinthians 13, talking about love. Love rejoices in truth. It does not rejoice in iniquity. Sin, we call it. Bad behavior. Evil behavior. Okay. I told you that I could prove that if you are not a lover of God, you're a hater of God automatically. What did Jesus say? You can't serve what? Can't serve two masters. Either you love the one and you hate the other, or you love the one and despise the other. Can't serve God and mammon or worldly things. So if you're not a lover of God, what does that automatically make you? And in order to be a lover of God, you have to be obedient, follow His commands. So if you're not doing that, you're on the wrong side. You're on the wrong side. Can't be neutral. That's Matthew 6:24, by the way. Matthew 6:24. You can't serve two masters. Can't be neutral. Define the sin of being despiteful. Sin of being despiteful. Grossly disrespectful. Grossly disrespectful. Hubristes. I automatically see hubris in there. Do you see that? Hubristes. Grossly disrespectful. We'll talk about hubris, what hubris is down here in just a minute. Or maybe we'll talk about it now. Grossly disrespectful. An insulter that is injurious. To have reproach. An insulter that is injurious. That's a lot of fancy words to say somebody says something that's hurtful, isn't it? Yeah, Brittany said she thinks it has to do with a person's feelings about themselves, and they don't have the means to raise themselves up, so they pull everybody else down. And I think that's a lot of behavior that we see. We sure see it in schools, don't we? You know, and I always told kids, being in that principal role, I see what you're doing. You're trying to get to the top, and you're going to do that by climbing over everybody. And I think about it climbing a mountain or climbing a wall. But isn't it better, if we really think about it, is if I boost you up so that you can get higher, then you can reach down and pull me up, and then we can work that again. But we don't think that way as humans, do we? We're going to get to the top, even though the top may be very low, instead of working together and building each other up to get higher. I may not be number one, but I'll be a lot higher than I was before, kind of deal. And the kids just look at me and stare. They have no concept of that kind of behavior. But being despiteful, grossly disrespectful. The New King James Version uses a word here, and I tried to figure out why that word was used there. Does it say violent? New King James? Verse 30. Should have been right before lack of understanding. Says violent? Okay. Violent. Being despiteful is violent. Well, that puts a twist on it that we don't normally think about and associate with being despiteful. But it's injurious when we think about that. It's doing damage to someone else's thoughts, their psyche, we say. It's injurious, it's violent, insolent. What about that word? English Standard Version says insolent. That's a word we don't use a lot. Anybody know? I found it meant rude and arrogant. Now that fits more how we think about despiteful, isn't it? You're rude and you're arrogant. Shows a lack of respect, doesn't it? Shows a lack of respect. All right, let's talk about this hubris. In Greek mythology, it's associated with Icarus. Icarus received wings made of wax, I think. And even though they told him, hey, calm down, don't be a show-off, he flew too close to the sun, and what happened to his wax wings? They melted. And that's where hubris, this feeling of building yourself up, thinking too highly of yourself, let's just call it what it is, being proud. And so hubris from Greek mythology, and that fits right into this, that root word, hubris, being grossly disrespectful. In Greek mythology, it meant defying the gods. We know that's little g gods. And that's what Icarus did. Pride, dangerous overconfidence. Dangerous overconfidence. I think of a couple examples of that. Once again, I go back to this, one of my favorite accounts, the 42 young men that the bears came out and ripped to shreds, the she-bears, because they made fun of Elisha, and by making fun of Elisha, they were making fun of God or being disrespectful to God. So that's the case. Job in chapter 30 of the book of Job says that he has become a derision. In fact, he is a perfect example for the people of the community that were talking about him as being used as a byword. That's his word, byword. An example of someone, and they're deriding and they're being grossly disrespectful to Job. A couple more. In Numbers chapter 16, the group that tried to usurp the authority of Moses, Dathan, Korah, and Abiram, they said, hey, make us leaders like you too. Well, when they did that, God had chosen Moses, so if they are rejecting Moses, who are they really rejecting? They're rejecting God. What happened to those fellas? I think the earth opened up and swallowed them in, didn't it? Yeah. And then the people that sided with them, a couple hundred or so, they were burned. We also see it in Numbers chapter 12, Aaron and Miriam. They were disrespectful, questioning Moses' leadership. Miriam on that occasion was made leprous, wasn't she? Because by being disrespectful to Moses, she was being disrespectful to God. So in that case, they were speaking out against Moses' wife. Do you remember that? All right. We'll introduce pride. Pride is conceit. Pride is conceit. It's a big old long word. Hupereiphonos. Hupereiphonos. Conceit beyond reason. You want to write that down in your notes as well. Not just conceit, conceit beyond reason. And arrogant superiority. Didn't we just talk about that? With this being disrespectful, this despiteful attitude, founded or rooted in arrogance. Pride. English Standard Version uses the word haughty. Appearing to make yourself above everyone else, not knowing where you properly rank, especially when it comes to feeling superiority to God. Proverbs 16:18, we know this verse. Pride goeth before what? Pride goes before destruction. We get to thinking too highly of ourselves. We can do anything we want to do. We're going to leave God out of it. Bite off more than we can chew, and things often don't go the way that they're planned because we think too highly of ourselves. Proverbs 21:4, a haughty look. A haughty look, that arrogant superiority. What would that look like? Kind of cock your head back a little bit and look down your nose. Is that what a haughty look would be? Notice I did that? Kind of stood up on my toes. What was I physically doing that was represented in my attitude? I'm going to make myself bigger than you, right? That haughty look and a proud heart. Mention a couple here. Hezekiah. Hezekiah, after he's had the years added to his life, gets to feeling a little bit arrogant about it when Babylon sent a letter. He said, yeah, come on and visit. And while they were there on the visit, to show his superiority, he showed them all of his treasures. We know what happened later. Babylon came back and took them, didn't they? And then Haman. We know the story of Haman. We've talked about it several times in class. He had this pride, this self-arrogance, that when Mordecai did not bow down to him, it made him mad, didn't it? Made him mad to the point that he tried to destroy a whole race of people. And so that's pride. We'll mention a few more things, and that's where we'll take off. Appreciate it. We'll take a few minutes break, and then we'll be back for our worship period.